Exciting news, guys. Team Rising is back. We are excited to have some old friends and fan favorites back with us today.
That's right. The All-Stars joining us now. Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman and Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy with the Conservative Partnership Institute. God, I haven't introduced two people together in such a long time. We're going to have a fun little panel discussion. Our all-time fan favorites. What are we going to talk about first?
That's right. It's so great to see both of you guys. So, look, we've been covering the polls here extensively. Donald Trump at this point is getting destroyed nationally and in the key battleground states. However, there's an interesting dynamic in the crosstabs that I wanted to get both of your thoughts on. If we could throw this NBC tear sheet up that shows some of the data. So Biden is doing better basically with white people of all stripes than Hillary Clinton did last time around. But he's actually underperforming somewhat with African Americans, relatively flat with young people, and has a pretty significant decline, not just in one poll, but in a series of polls among Latino voters. Andrew, let me start with you. What do you think is going on there?
Well, what I think is going on is that people don't know who Joe Biden is, the person. I think especially Latinos, right? Latinos don't know that Joe Biden is a family man, his life story, what he has overcome with personal tragedy, what he has overcome in economic hardship growing up. And I think the campaign needs to make sure they tell his story to Latinos, and they make sure they bring in some of the best strategists to be able to do that, right? I think if you just run an anti-Trump campaign to Latinos, I don't think that's going to get the numbers that we want. We need to make a connection between Joe Biden, his story, and the Latino community, and I hope to see that from the campaign.
Yeah, Rachel, let me bring you in here. What's really interesting to me is the Biden campaign, the whole Dem Party's strategy right now is trying to win over these white suburbanites and boomers, right? And that's working by and large. You can win the election that way. You can win big. But it sets up an opportunity for the GOP. Something I'll never forget is that Biden actually revised the tax, who he would not tax, from $250,000 to $400,000. The same day as this "you ain't black" comment. That's something is what I looked at and I said, wow, he's going hardcore against kind of these upper middle class suburban liberals. So is that what it explains it? Is, Latino Americans are largely a working class demographic. Same, of course, with black Americans. And that leaves a little bit of an opportunity for the Trump campaign, or maybe they're just blown it so much at this point they can't do it, but some other GOP politician in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you've hit on something that I think is really important. Both parties, I think, over time have made mistakes just making assumptions about groups of people and racial classifications. And this is one of them. And I think the Democrats are doing this a little bit with Latino voters, saying, well, it's all about immigration. Well, it's not, because of what you just pointed out. Hispanics are largely a working class population. They care about economic issues, and they don't get sucked into this white guilt woke trap that I think, a lot of the suburban white people do. And this is where Trump's economic populist message resonates. If the campaign is doing anything right now, it's making that message clear to Latino voters. It's bread and butter issues for them. It's, believe it or not, border control. There was a Pew poll that came out earlier this year that showed 75% of Hispanics said we should enforce more border security. That's huge. And it's because of it's a jobs issue for them, essentially. And so this is where Trump should double down on this message. It might be the only thing the campaign's doing right now, to be honest.
Andrew, just respond to that, Andrew, because I do think, back in 2016, there was an assumption, as Rachel put it, that because, Trump launches his campaign, say they're not sending their best, they're sending rapists, murder, whatever the quote was, a lot of ugly racialized rhetoric during the campaign. And so there was this assumption, and with the hardline immigration positions, that Latinos would just overwhelmingly go for Democrats automatically and become this sort of firm voting bloc in the way that African Americans have become for the Democratic Party. That didn't happen with Hillary Clinton, and it seems like Joe Biden at this point is on track to do even worse. So what are some of the faulty assumptions that Democrats have made to this point about this community?
Well, first of all, we can't make any assumptions, right? Assumptions really kill us. They will kill us in this election, just like they killed us in 2016. So we can't become complacent and we can't make assumptions. Look, Latinos are one of the trickiest voting blocs to turn out. That's our challenge with Latinos. But also one of the things we have to remember, and this is me as a white person talking about this, but also having talked a lot to close Latino friends, is that Latinos don't all think the same way, right? There are very unique differences between different Latino and Hispanic communities, and we need to make sure we're diving into those specific issues. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We need to be focused on what matters to Puerto Ricans, what matters to Mexicans, what matters to Colombians, etc. These are all different demographics, and we need to make sure we are targeting what their community cares about. We cannot just say, oh, look what Trump has said about immigration. Yes, it's horrific. Yes, it's awful what Trump is going to continue to do in the next several months to increase his rhetoric around immigration. But that being said, we have to go back to the bread and butter issues in addition to what's going on with immigration and lay out a real plan on how we're going to put more Latinos to work. What are we going to do here with the issue of healthcare, an issue that does largely affect Latinos and minority populations? So we have to address these issues. We can't just rely on immigration rhetoric.
Andrew, let me stick with you quickly here. You talk a lot to people in the Democratic world, the Biden campaign. Are they very comfortable with where they are right now, even with the polling position? Are they comfortable with the strategy of winning over many of these white suburbanites, despite the fact that it may be contra to much of the economic policy which they originally kind of centered the party around?
Look, I think they're very happy with where they are in the polling, but I also don't think they're taking anything for granted. They are continuing to, and we've just seen this. We've started to see early or big investment in Latino communities. I think we're going to see that extensively increase over the next few weeks. Let me say something about young voters quickly here. Young voters, we need to remember, they are very, very passionate about the issues. So young voters may not be that excited about Joe Biden, but they are fired up about the issues and their values. And I think they're going to come out and vote for the candidate who supports their issue positions, their value positions, and I think that benefits us as the Democratic Party.
Rachel, let me ask you about this Trump tweet that surprised a lot of people, if we can throw this up, where he's talking about suburban housewives and wants them to, the suburban housewives of America. You gotta love how he capitalizes that, like it's some organization that we're members of. Must read this article. Biden will destroy your neighborhood and your American dream. I will preserve it and make it even better. I mean, first of all, comment on the awkward phrasing and the sort of caricaturish 1950s way that he's talking about this issue. But, he had said before in that kind of weird Rose Garden thing, he talked about Joe Biden wants to abolish the suburbs. They're talking about this plan that came into place under the Obama administration that was aimed at diversifying the suburbs. Clearly, he seems to realize he's got a big issue here, but I'm not sure that he knows how to deal with it.
Yeah, I didn't love the reference to suburban housewives of America. It just provokes this blonde, Botoxed, Chardonnay sipping woman that it doesn't really exist. I don't know. Anyway, I just moved to the suburbs, so that's clearly not me. But I do think that Trump is honing in on something because I think he's starting to realize that he has a group of people who feel like he's not fighting for them. This was the group of people that came to Trump because they thought he was standing up against, I think, a progressive takeover. Because I think this Obama era regulation, if you look at it, actually is sort of the annexation of the suburbs and developing it along racial lines. It's allowing the cities to sort of set up its own zoning ordinances in local communities. And that's a big issue. And I think it became clear that Ben Carson wasn't going to do anything about it. Ben Carson's HUD suspended the regulation, but didn't get rid of it, just tinkered with it. And for a lot of conservatives, they were like, why did I vote for this guy to just, not upend the system he told me he was going to upend? So I think what you're seeing is Trump's maybe ham-handed effort to say, look, I'm listening. I do see these things that are important to you, and I'm trying to make this last desperate attempt to show you that I'm fighting for you.
Yeah, Rachel, let's pick up a little bit more on this, because the suburban thing, I agree with you. I think it's a very potent political issue, but the issue is that it seems to be crammed together with so much other stuff, right? So you have the executive order on the census, which is clearly not enforceable. You have this. I hear that they're signing a drug pricing order today, right? So you have the agenda and like all of these things that they had said they were going to do for 3.5 years, didn't do, and are now trying to cram in to a 4-month period, also in the middle of this thing called a pandemic, where the news cycle is not going to be favorable and not even going to focus on little things like this. Do you think it's actually going to work? Because to me, it just feels like flailing.
It does a little bit, and I think it's reflective of the dynamic that has existed in this White House from the beginning, and that is the fact that when Trump won in 2016, he crushed the bones of the sort of corporatist neoliberal Republican Party. But those bones have been very insistently trying to reconstitute for 3 years.
It's like a zombie.
And that war has been what we've been seeing. And I think it's pushed off a lot of these sort of economic populist actions that Trump could have taken. And so now you're starting to see that tension again come out into play. And the result is it looks like flailing.
Yeah.
Andrew, that's right.
Could you just comment on why it is that radical Marxist Joe Biden wants to abolish the suburbs?
Look, this is scare tactic. This is what we're going to see more of from Donald Trump. Donald Trump knows he's in trouble. The only thing he knows how to do is put fear in Americans and scare Americans, and he's going to try to do that here. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
If he's scaring Americans, it's like scaring them away from voting for him at this point.
Right.
All right, guys.
Almost 150,000 dead.
Yeah.
All right, guys, stick with us. We're going to have more with Team Rising right after this.